Should parents decide what schools teach? The LGBTQ book case that divided a nation. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. It started with a book, one classroom, and a question that split a community in two. The town of Crestwood, Virginia, wasn't used to controversy. It was a quiet place. Families, churches, football on Fridays. Most folks worked jobs, paid bills, and tried to stay out of politics. But in the fall of 2023, that all changed. In room 102 of Crestwood Middle School, 8th grade students were handed a reading list. Among the usual classics, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Outsiders, Of Mice and Men, was a novel called Rainbows and Razor Blades, a coming-of-age story about a non-binary teenager struggling with identity in a conservative town. One parent noticed it first, then another. By the end of the week, the entire school board had received over 100 emails demanding the book be removed. And then, the fire started. November 2nd, 2023. The Crestwood School Board convened in a packed gymnasium. Normally, only a few parents showed up. But that night, there were hundreds. Lines snaked outside. News vans arrived. The local paper live-streamed it. Emotions ran high. Some parents held copies of the book, highlighted, dog-eared, angry. Others clutched rainbow flags. A mother approached the podium. "This book is not education. It's indoctrination. My child doesn't need to read about gender confusion at 13. Gasps, then cheers. But another parent stood up next. "You want to ban this book? Then ban the Bible too. Talks about murder, incest, slavery. Are we afraid of truth or just uncomfortable with it?" Boos. The board sat frozen. They hadn't seen this coming. They thought it was just one book. Within days, lines were drawn. On one side, parents, pastors, and a conservative coalition calling themselves Protect Our Kids. On the other, students, teachers, and a group called Freedom to Read. The local Facebook groups exploded. Families who once attended church together now crossed the street to avoid each other. Rumors flew. "They're teaching our kids to be gay. They want to erase parents' rights. The teachers are hiding things from us." Protests began outside the school. One group waved signs, "Let kids be kids." The other, "Reading is not a crime." Police were called. A school bus was vandalized with the words, "Groomers." The national media picked it up. And just like that, Crestwood wasn't quiet anymore. At the center of the storm was Mrs. Eliza Monroe, English teacher, 10 years of service, glowing reviews. She'd added Rainbows and Razor Blades to the list after several students asked for books that reflected their experiences. She didn't push it. It was optional. But that didn't matter. Her photo was shared on social media. Memes mocked her. Trolls flooded her inbox. Pedophile, pervert, woke trash. One night, she found her tires slashed. A note taped to her door, "Leave or burn." She went silent. Her lawyer spoke instead. Mrs. Monroe included a book that's won national awards, that meets the district's literary standards, and that was clearly marked as optional. The attacks on her character are not just unfair, they're dangerous. But the board was under pressure, and they were about to make a decision. December 7th. Tension filled the Crestwood Gymnasium again. The board had reviewed over 600 emails. Half for the book, half against. News cameras rolled. Police stood by. The school board president cleared his throat. "We have reached a decision regarding the book titled Rainbows and Razor Blades." Silence. "The book will be removed from the recommended list effective immediately." Gasps. Cheers. Tears. Mrs. Monroe didn't attend. She was already on paid leave. That night, students protested in front of the school. Rainbow candles. Posters that read, "We exist." One student spoke through a megaphone. "You took away our voice, but we're still here. You can't erase us." That clip went viral, and Crestwood was now a national flashpoint. Donations poured in from across the country to support the students. The ACLU got involved. A lawsuit was filed, Monroe versus Crestwood Unified School District. Claim: violation of First Amendment rights and wrongful suspension. More families joined in, and the Department of Education opened a formal inquiry into the school's handling of LGBTQ+ materials. But while the legal battle brewed, the human toll mounted. A trans student attempted suicide after classmates mocked them in the hallway. A teacher quietly resigned, citing hostile work environment. Churches began splitting over how to respond. A culture war had arrived, and it wasn't leaving anytime soon. The town of Spring Valley used to be quiet. Nestled in a corner of suburban America, its library was a modest red brick building, a place where children whispered, where seniors read the newspaper, and where no one paid much attention to politics. Until one day, a book changed everything. Not just any book. A young adult novel featuring two boys who fall in love. It had sat quietly on the shelf for years. No one noticed. No one complained. Until a 7th grader brought it home, and her mother read a few pages. She was furious. Her name was Karen Whitmore, PTA president, church volunteer, and now accidental activist. Karen took to Facebook that night. "My daughter brought this home from the school library. I will not sit by while our kids are indoctrinated." The post went viral. Within hours, the comment section was a battlefield. Some parents cheered. Others called it censorship. But one thing was clear: a line had been drawn. By the next morning, the school board's inbox was flooded. Angry parents, concerned citizens, even local pastors chimed in. A special meeting was called. Inside the packed gymnasium, the microphone was open. A father shouted, "We just want to protect our kids." A teacher responded, "Protect them from what? Empathy?" Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. This wasn't just about one book anymore. It was about power. In the chaos, no one expected the students to speak up. But they did. A group of high schoolers formed a coalition. Students for Inclusive Education. They marched to the library with rainbow pins and posters that read, "We deserve to be seen." One sophomore, Leo Martinez, stood in front of the school board and read a poem. "You fear the words that saved my life, but silence cuts me like a knife." The room went silent. Even the angriest parents looked shaken. But the vote still happened. 5-2. The book was pulled. CNN picked up the story. Then Fox News. Then every podcast, pundit, and political figure with a stake in the culture war. Spring Valley was no longer just a town. It was a symbol. One headline read, "Should parents control the classroom? The battle over LGBTQ books in schools." Suddenly, school board members were receiving death threats. The librarian had to hire security. The students were doxxed. A small disagreement had become a national firestorm. State legislators got involved. A bill was introduced, the Parents' Curriculum Transparency Act. It would require schools to list every book available to students online, with a rating system for sensitive content. Supporters called it empowering. Critics called it a slippery slope to censorship. Teachers were terrified. One emailed anonymously, "If I mention the word gay in class, am I risking my job?" The chilling effect spread. Some schools began preemptively removing any book that might spark outrage. Hundreds of titles disappeared overnight. Spring Valley wasn't alone. Districts across the U.S. were now divided. In one Texas county, 47 books were banned in a single week. In California, a counter-movement emerged. Communities holding read-ins, where banned books were read aloud in public. It became a tug-of-war. One side claimed to defend innocence, the other identity. And kids? They were caught in the middle. Mrs. Brenda McAllister had led Spring Valley High for 18 years. She wasn't political, but now she had to choose. In a confidential interview, she said, "I'm being told to discipline teachers who support LGBTQ students, but I also have parents threatening to pull their kids out if I don't. How do I win?" She wept, then said something chilling. "I'm not sure I believe in public education anymore." For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The gymnasium was packed. Not for a basketball game, not for a school dance. This time, it was standing room only for a school board meeting. The agenda, book bans. But it was never just about books. It was about identity, control, and who held the power to decide what stories were worth telling. The meeting opened with formalities. Minutes read, motions passed. Then came the public comments. Karen Whitmore was first. She stepped to the microphone with a Bible in one hand and a printed excerpt in the other. She read aloud from the banned book, out of context, with emphasis on the most provocative lines. "This filth has no place in our schools." Applause erupted. Parents nodded. Some shouted, "Protect our kids." But others looked down, uncomfortable, ashamed, angry. Then came the rebuttal. Leo Martinez, a 17-year-old senior, stood up. He wore a rainbow pin on his denim jacket. He unfolded a sheet of paper and began to read. His own poem, about growing up queer in Spring Valley. It was raw, personal, quiet. You could hear a pin drop. "I don't want to be erased," he said, voice trembling. "Let us exist. Let us breathe. Let us read." A teacher clapped. Then a student. Then the whole left side of the room. The board listened, but their faces were stone. 2 members whispered. 1 avoided eye contact. Then the vote. 4-3. The bans would stay. Cries of outrage. Cheers of support. Chaos. Police escorted families out the side exits. Local news cameras captured every tear, every fist raised. Spring Valley was split down the middle. Neighbors no longer spoke. Teachers felt muzzled. Librarians were scrutinized. And the students? They were caught in the middle. Ms. Melissa Cho taught 9th grade English. She had once won Teacher of the Year. Now she faced a formal complaint. Her offense? Allowing students to choose a banned book for an independent project. "I didn't assign it," she told the principal. "They chose it. It didn't matter." Parent called the school board. A warning was placed in her file. She was told to stick to the approved reading list, one that excluded all LGBTQ stories. Students felt it too. Books were removed from shelves. Posters were torn down. One student, Sky, who identified as non-binary, found slurs scrawled on their locker. They reported it. Nothing happened. Their friends began eating lunch in the art room, away from the stairs, the whispers. School no longer felt safe. On a sunny Saturday, 2 parent groups held rallies. One group waved signs reading, "Protect Innocence." Another group countered with "Knowledge is power." Arguments broke out. One parent shoved another. Police broke it up. It made the evening news. Again, the anchor ended with, "A small town torn apart by big questions." In the shadows, resistance was growing. Students formed underground book clubs. Teachers exchanged banned titles in brown paper bags. Librarians built coded lists. Ms. Cho hosted private Zoom sessions to discuss marginalized voices. She knew the risk, but she couldn't stay silent. One night, she got an email from Sky. "Thank you for seeing me," she cried at her desk. The ACLU took notice. They contacted Leo's family, and Sky's, and Ms. Cho. They began building a case. First Amendment violations, equal protection. Papers were filed. The headline made national news. Students sue school board over LGBTQ book ban. Some celebrated. Others called it an attack on parental rights. But the case was real, and it was coming. Karen Whitmore received flowers from supporters, and death threats from critics. Leo's family had to install cameras. Ms. Cho was put on leave, but no one backed down. This was bigger than a town, bigger than a library, bigger than fear. It was a battle for the soul of education, and the right to be seen. Educators warned the school board, "This will hurt us in the long run." College counselors saw students withdrawing. Mental health referrals skyrocketed. When a survey asked students if they felt safe at school, over 40% said no. Yet the board doubled down. "This is about values," they said. "But whose values? And at what cost?" As winter crept in, the case moved toward trial. Sky rehearsed their testimony with a lawyer. Leo drafted a statement. Ms. Cho prepared her files. The nation watched. Would a small town's book ban stand? Or would the Constitution speak louder? In the cold gray of February, the court doors would open, and Spring Valley would be judged not just by laws, but by history, because this wasn't just a local fight. It was a message, and the whole country was listening. The silence was louder than the protests. After the cameras left and the reporters moved on, Spring Valley High School felt hollow. Not empty of people, but of presence. The banned books were gone, the posters taken down, the rainbow flags removed from classroom doors. But something else had vanished too. Hope. Leo Martinez no longer spoke up in class. Once the loudest voice in the Students for Inclusive Education group, he now kept his eyes on his desk. His poem had made headlines, but the aftermath made him feel like a target. "They watch me now," he whispered to a friend. "Like I'm a problem, not a person." His grades slipped. Teachers looked away. Even his guidance counselor suggested he lay low for a while. It wasn't just Leo. Kaylin Gwynn, a junior who came out as bisexual last semester, found her locker defaced. "Groomer," it read. The school said it was investigating. Nothing happened. Across the country, similar stories unfolded. A trans student in Florida was told to use the teacher's lounge bathroom because their identity was disruptive. A queer teen in Oklahoma stopped attending class after being publicly outed at a school board meeting. Many began to retreat online. Discord servers, Reddit threads, anonymous TikToks. Their message was the same: "We're still here." One post went viral. "You can ban the books. You can ban the words. But you can't ban us." Melissa Cho wasn't the only educator under fire. Mr. Avery, a history teacher in Wisconsin, was suspended for showing a documentary on the Stonewall riots. He hadn't even known it was on the sensitive content list. Miss Thomas in Georgia was reprimanded for wearing a "Love is Love" pin. Some teachers quit. Others stayed and became shadows of themselves. They stopped using student-preferred pronouns. They took down inclusive posters. They removed entire sections from lesson plans. "It's not teaching anymore," one said. "It's survival." Spring Valley had become two towns. On one side, parents demanding traditional values, emboldened by new laws. On the other, families mourning the erasure of their children. Pride events were canceled. An LGBTQ support group was forced to meet in secret. A student named Eli wrote on a bathroom stall, "They took my library, but not my voice." By the next day, it was painted over. Mental health counselors reported a surge in anxiety, depression, and even self-harm. A 13-year-old in Missouri attempted suicide after being outed by a teacher who didn't know what the rules were anymore. An LGBTQ hotline reported record call volume, but budgets for counseling services were cut because funding was being rerouted to parental oversight committees. These weren't just policy changes. They were emotional gut punches. Not everyone went quiet. In Los Angeles, teens held a banned book readathon in front of their city hall. In New York, students formed a coalition called Voices That Won't Vanish. In Spring Valley, Leo found his courage again. He started a podcast, Erased But Not Gone. Each week, a different student shared their story anonymously. By the third episode, they had over 100,000 listens. One comment read, "This podcast saved my life." Civil rights groups began to push back hard. They filed lawsuits against school districts. Petitions gained millions of signatures. Documentaries were pitched. But the most powerful push came from the students themselves. They showed up to board meetings. They held silent protests. They shared their stories with journalists. One teen in Ohio stood with duct tape over their mouth and held a sign, "Banned, but breathing." Mrs. Clara Hensley had worked in Spring Valley's library for 22 years. After the ban, she was told to box up over 30 books. She did, but not how they expected. She labeled the box Freedom Files and kept it in her office. When students came in quietly and asked for the books, she gave them a knowing nod. "I'm old enough to retire," she told a friend. "What are they going to do? Fire me for believing in truth?" She was suspended 2 months later, but not before every book was read and passed around. In basements and backyards, students started what they called underground classrooms. They met to discuss banned topics. They read banned books. They practiced speeches, debated politics, and shared their truths. It was messy. It was imperfect, but it was real. And for many, it was the only education that made them feel whole. The erasure wasn't complete, because stories live in people, not just pages. And every time a student spoke, wrote, or whispered the truth, they rewrote what had been stripped away. The battle wasn't over, but the silence had cracked. The sun rose over Spring Valley like any other day, but the town wasn't the same. The library shelves were thinner. Teachers were cautious. Students whispered instead of shouting their truths. Yet beneath the silence, something else stirred, a refusal to be erased. In the quiet corner of Spring Valley's local cafe, a group of students began to meet. They called themselves the Banned Book Club. Leo Martinez, the same student who read his poem at the school board meeting, was their unofficial leader. They met every Friday. Each week, a new book, a new story someone tried to silence. They read, they discussed, they questioned. What began as a small group of 5 grew into 20, then 30. Then chapters popped up in neighboring towns. It became a movement. Their slogan, "Read what they fear." Ms. Evelyn Carter had worked in the Spring Valley Library for 33 years. She had watched generations of kids grow up. She had helped them find their first mystery, their first fantasy, their first truth. But now she was under pressure. The board demanded she submit every book for review. She refused. "I know these stories," she said in a news interview, "and I know what they mean to the kids who find themselves in them." Her contract was not renewed. On her last day, dozens of students lined up outside the library. They handed her copies of the banned books. Each had a sticky note attached. "Thank you for letting me be seen." Not all parents supported the bans. Jennifer Chu, a mother of 2, organized a forum called Let Kids Learn. She invited parents, educators, students, even those who disagreed. Some walked out, but others listened. "I was afraid," one father admitted. "But then I talked to my son. He just wanted to read about someone like him." Small shifts began happening. Not overnight, not loudly, but they were real. A study by the University of Chicago revealed something grim. In districts where LGBTQ content was banned, suicide rates among queer youth rose. Teachers were burnt out. Some left education altogether. And in Spring Valley, the school's national ranking dropped. Not because of academics, because of student disengagement. "They stopped feeling safe here," said a guidance counselor. "So they stopped showing up." The ACLU filed a lawsuit against the Spring Valley School Board. The case, violation of First Amendment rights and equal protection under the law. The defense argued they were protecting family values. But the plaintiffs had something more powerful. Testimonies. Leo, Melissa Cho, Ms. Carter, dozens of others. In one pivotal moment, a non-binary 11th grader named Sky took the stand. "I am not a danger," they said. "I'm just a kid, trying to feel like I belong." The courtroom fell silent. A month later, the court ruled. The book ban was unconstitutional. The ruling didn't fix everything, but the books returned. So did Ms. Carter, this time as an honorary guest speaker in schools across the country. The Banned Book Club published a national reading list. It went viral. Educators who had been quiet began to speak. And students, once afraid, now stood proud. Spring Valley became a case study. Journalists covered it. Documentaries were made. A teacher in Georgia used Leo's poem in her curriculum. A school in Utah hosted a Freedom to Read festival. One by one, other districts overturned their bans. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.